Transition Awareness Breathing. Feeling grounded for both children and parents is essential for healthy living and learning. Join Eartha Powell on this series for tips and tools for creating a harmonious environment for learning. Transition Awareness Breathing will help you and your child find an individualized path to tackle change, promote lifelong learning, and discover new approaches to calmness.
During these last few weeks, we have explored boundaries and barriers. I hope I was able to guide you to just think a little bit more about what boundaries are, what barriers are, and to realize that we all have our boundaries and our barriers. That part is not a surprise. I hope that you can be aware a little bit more of other people's boundaries and to show compassion and kindness, and most of all, acceptance. If we can show kindness and compassion regarding other people's boundaries and barriers, realizing that their boundary or their barrier may come from an experience or values. And before we wiggle our fingers at other people, we should take that finger and point it to ourselves, because we are showing our boundaries and our barriers to others. We don't know what happens in other people's lives, and I think it's a lot to ask when people feel like they have to explain and express their circumstances so that they can be accepted. Even with mindfulness, we're just not at a point in this society where we can look at a person regardless of their skin color, regardless of their religious values, regardless of their social status. We're not at a point yet where we can accept a person. And accepting a person doesn't mean that you're agreeing with that person. It doesn't mean that you will do everything that other person does, or you will cascade into the other person's world. It just means that you recognize that that person is a part of this imperfect world, just like you. And if we get to a point where we only feel comfortable with people just like us, we have just defined our barrier and our boundary. Whatever your spiritual connection is, whether you believe or you don't believe, it just takes a moment to realize that the world is made up of people different than us, And maybe one day we can be a mentor. We can be a leader. We can be a special force person to show how to be compassionate to others with a mindfulness perspective, meaning that we're not passing judgment. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just the present status of the here and the now. And that's it. Taking in the information. And I think that when we become judgmental, it really shows how uncomfortable and how uncertain we are of ourselves. There's a saying that has been around for many, many years. Action speaks louder than words. I hope that this podcast has given you a little bit of thought and reflect how you communicate your barriers and your boundaries. And the goal is to not only to self-reflect, but the ultimate goal is how are you going to contribute to the world of tomorrow in a compassionate, kind way without judgment. When I look at the waves and the ocean and realize that as powerful as the ocean is, the waves, it has boundaries, and yet it respects the different shapes. It takes forms of the different shapes. It doesn't try to pass judgment on the shapes. It may go around the shapes. It may go over the shapes. And so as you participate, and I encourage you to participate in this practice, realize that the ocean and the surf sides are working together in a way that brings calmness and unity and harmony. The power and the structure of the ocean against the sands and the shore and the rocks, bringing unity, bringing peace. I hope you find your piece of that shore to bring peace and unity in your day. Enjoy your practice. And now let's pick up where I left off. Let's get started. However, our personal boundaries really need to be communicated. What you expose yourself to, you may not tolerate certain things on social media. Some things you may say, I don't look at that. I'm not gonna comment on that. That's your boundary. Okay, some people don't mind looking at certain things or communicating certain things. That's their boundary. And so what my boundary is mine. And to be accepting and not judgmental about someone else's boundary, that's what we have to learn, is to accept each other for each other's boundaries. There's 6 types of boundaries. If you look up boundaries, it's intellectual boundaries, and that's related to our thoughts, our conversations, topics that we share, and I think we've talked about that. Emotional boundaries, where a person shares their emotional life, how much you share and how much you should not share. You have some boundaries. Sexual boundaries, relationship boundaries, needs to be communicated. What is tolerated and what is not tolerated? What's your values? Certainly inappropriate touching or joking needs to be communicated. Time boundaries, how we relate to our own time and also how we relate to other people's time. Material boundaries is how we treat material things, possessions and properties. And then physical boundaries. And here again is, it could be a cultural or value thing as far as physical space, personal space, experience, and your own respect and need for privacy. And so these boundaries in a mindful world, in order to communicate them, we have to be aware of what our boundaries are and explore them. Also, to be able to, as far as the intellectual boundaries and emotional boundaries, to grow. Because our boundaries, when we expand our mind, our imagination, it sparks creativity. And with sparks of creativity, we can come up with new ways or more effective ways of handling our stress, our anger. If we've been exposed to a family value with anger, for example, and the anger is shouting and throwing things, we can learn to grow beyond expressing our anger in such a physical, negative way, and to learn how to express our anger with words or with art or with release it through physical exercise. As you explore your barriers and your boundaries, I invite you to find a comfortable position as I guide you through an exercise that I hope will bring not just calmness, but also to explore a little bit about your boundaries and to open up your strength to communicate your boundaries to yourself and to others. And also to be willing to be sensitive of others' people's boundaries and realize that if there are barriers in the lives of other people, just take in consideration maybe those barriers were put there because of a life circumstance that that person has gone through. And so to express compassion and acceptance, and if you cannot accept, that's okay, but to recognize from yourself, not the person is a bad guy, but from yourself, from your values perspective, that you're having a hard time accepting a person's boundary or barrier. And that is something that you have to deal with, because we live in a world with different people. As you prepare yourself and get into a comfortable position, I invite you to be aware of the inner space, the inner peace within your mind, within the inner core of your soul is there. No matter what your barrier may be, I invite you to take this moment and tap into it. Tap into that part without barriers. Some may call it daydreaming. Some may call it relaxation. Just a moment in this place without barriers releases your creative spirit. And as you allow yourself to be free and to flow and to release, allow yourself to be open to receive, to be thankful, and find that spark, that creative spark, that calm spark that's been hiding until now. And take a breath and release any barriers in your mind, in your soul, and in your heart. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again next time. Have a great day. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I appreciate you taking time and listening to my podcast. I look forward to talking to you again next time. Have a great day.
Be sure and pick up a copy of Tab Mindfulness, Awareness and Coloring Activities in a Pandemic World. It's not just an ordinary coloring book. It features 23 illustrations to stimulate thought, relaxation, and creativity for anyone between the ages of 4 and 94. Increase your positive self-talk energy. Unlock new creative paths. Transform your time once or twice a week to create beautiful art while strengthening confidence, building positive self-talk, and sensitize self-awareness. Tab Mindfulness, Awareness and Coloring Activities in a Pandemic World. It's available now at Amazon.com.